Today's session, we have agreed with Honorable Diambo that he will find us. So Kelly Agira is assisting him so that he can get his logins right, and then he can join us for this session. This is our 6th session. That is the KMJA and the Kenya Cyber Security and Forensics Association collaboration. And we've been talking about a range of things on cyber forensics and ICT issues. So today, before we start, we'd like to lay down some ground rules. We are using Zoom. Normally, we've been using GoToMeetings app. So please, if you're not speaking, as we are all doing, let's mute our mics. And of course, we'll get questions as presentations continue. Feel free to go to the chats and then put your questions there. Or you can also write it somewhere and wait so that after the two presenters have made their presentations, there'll be a session for questions and answers. We have two presenters today for our session. We have Michael Mbuthia, and we also have Honorable David Odhiambo. We'll talk more about them in a short while. So in the session today, we're talking about fraud. Back in the days, fraud was a worry of people who lived in the cities, a Nairobi problem. In the villages, it was a word that was rarely used. But these days, there's a lot going on. We have those messages we get, tuma pesa kwa hii namba, ile ingine iko na fuliza, italeta jina boyo. And then we have fraud involving big multinational companies that are losing billions of money to online fraud. So that's why this meeting is also very timely, because of the days that we are living in. This is a high-level Zoom meeting because we're having experts in the field talking to us, answering our questions. So please sit loose, relax, participate, enjoy the sessions. In our partnership, and in this meeting here, we have our president, the president of the Kenya Magistrates and Judges Association, Honorable Lady Justice Jacqueline Kamau. And we also have the chairman of the Kenya Cyber Security and Forensics Association. These are the heads of the two organizations that are collaborating. Both of them will get opportunities to speak. But for now, we want to open the session by asking Honorable Lady Justice Jacqueline Kamau, the president of the KMJA, to make welcoming and opening remarks to this session. Madam President, karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Sepu. I don't know whether you can get me. Are you getting me?
Yes, Judge, we are getting you.
All right, thank you very much. So first of all, it's just to appreciate the efforts that the two associations have made into having very many webinars and this very, very important webinar today. So mine is just to really welcome all the participants who are here. I know very many people. I can see my internet is unstable. I don't know. But I'm hoping that you're going to be able to hear me, and to recognize Lady Justice Helen Omondi. Helen Omondi, maybe you can just wave to the people and just say hello to them. There she is. Thank you very much. I can see Honorable Ben Makehubi, who is also magistrate and a head of station in one of the courts that we have. So just to let everybody know that we are also taking this thing very seriously as judges and judicial officers, because we are not experts. This is an area that we really need a lot of education. So we'll be very excited to hear from Michael Mbuthia and also Honorable Odhiambo, because they're experts in this area. When you come to court, our job is to listen to the two sides, but it's not necessarily that we are experts in that area, because these are very technical areas. So we hope that even the judicial officers and the judges who will have attended the session will enjoy it and be able to interact with it so that when some of these terms are brought before us in court, will be able to know exactly what they mean. So for me, let me stop there, Dan Sepu, and to say thank you very much, and I wish to welcome everybody on this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Dan, back
Madam
to you,
President.
please. Back
Yes,
to you.
yes. Thank you very much, Madam President, for your sentiments. We appreciate we have been able to get you, of course, over the few internet issues, but we are grateful that we got everything that you had to say. Thank you very much. So because Honorable David Odhiambo has not yet joined us, let's talk a bit about our presenter, Mr. Michael G. Mbudia. David Odhiambo, welcome to the forum. And because you've just arrived, we've done our introductions. So we'll soon be getting to you, sort of bombarding you to start your presentation. But before we do that, let's say something about Honorable David Odhiambo. Honorable Odhiambo holds a degree in laws from Moi University, LLB. He also holds an LLM in public finance and financial services law from the University of Nairobi. He has a postgraduate diploma course from the Kenya School of Law. And he's currently doing a diploma in tax administration. Honorable Odhiambo is also a member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. He's currently the resident magistrate for Shansu Law Courts. Honorable Odhiambo worked as a legal officer in the local bank for 3 years before joining the judiciary. So with all that experience that you've talked about, we are happy to listen to Honorable Odhiambo, and he will be talking about case law, he will be talking about the CBK and the prudential guidelines, he will be talking about mobile banking. So please, let's enjoy the session. Karibu sana, Honorable David Odhiambo.
Thank you so much, Dan, and everyone who is attending. I was not able to join in time due to technical issues, but I'm glad now I'm here with you. My presentation will take around around 15 minutes. I'll try to be fast enough so that I give my other panelists time to present. Just as Dan had said, I'll be presenting basically on things relating to CBK, Financial Reporting Center, and the role of Banking Fraud Investigation Unit, investigating frauds that happen within our financial sector. As we all know, the financial sector of any country is crucial for the growth of the country. Its sensitivity and stability is so crucial that when left unattended to, then the economy will be on a spiral spin. It's for this reason that the sector needs robust laws for its protection, and the people charged with its management are expected to be vigilant on the happenings within the sector. Despite all the vigilance that the management of the sector have put in place, there are also still those people who are plotting to compromise the sector by identifying risks for mischievous purposes and are getting rich quickly. In Kenya, cases of electronic fraud in the financial sector have been on the rise in the recent past. A month cannot pass by without money through some fraudulent means nobody can understand. But there's never perfect crime. These criminals at times, and most of the time, they leave digital footprint, which enable our law enforcement officers to catch up with them. They are smart, let's admit. Long are the days when robbers will raid a bank and direct everybody at a gunpoint to surrender whatever they have and then cut away lots of cash with them. the 21st century bank robber has managed to keep social distance and is busy working from home. Most of the times they succeed. But they are not so smart enough not to be caught. Their main target are banks and financial institutions. Someone might ask, what might lead someone to commit fraud, knowing very well that they will definitely be caught, and the chances of them being caught are equal to the chances of the sun rising from the east tomorrow. In tax law, there's something people call the fraud triangle. It is what leads someone to commit fraud. And there are three factors we call fraud triangle. There is a perceived pressure. You need money, but you don't know how to get it. So you find yourself planning on how you can lay your hands on money that does not belong to you. That is pressure. When an opportunity arises, you try to reduce that pressure by stealing. That's the third point, opportunity. Then later on, you justify your actions. It's called rationalization. One, either you are under pressure, you got an opportunity, you've committed the fraud, now you want to justify it. You want to rationalize what you've done. There's a Nigerian professor who has come up with the various factors that contribute people to commit fraud in the banking industry. I'll mention a few of them. Most banks, not most, no system is perfect. You find that the accounting systems in most banks are not all that strong, and someone will want to take advantage and penetrate them. There's also inadequate supervision of the subordinates. Then there's also disregard of KYC. KYC means know your customer. Before a customer comes to a bank and opens an account, you are required as a bank to authenticate the true identity of the person you are dealing with. There's also poor information technology and database management system. Then the poor salaries. Someone thinks that I'm not being paid enough, but I need money, so they'll take advantage of that and try to steal, commit fraud. What also contributes to fraud in the banking industry is that most banks are reluctant to report fraud due to the perceived negative publicity. If you are in bank X and you are told that there was a breach in that bank and money was lost, chances high that you kind of lose confidence in that bank. So most banks will not want to advertise, tell people that they lost money through fraud. Another excuse someone might give is the banking experience of most staff. There is inadequate infrastructure that may include communication systems, which result to unbalanced posting, inadequate training of the staff, so someone will try to take advantage of all that. In my presentation, I will focus on what CBK does. CBK as a regulator does or has put in place to manage the online fraudster. CBK, as I've said, is the regulator of the banking industry. So CBK together with FRC, like I've said, is Financial Reporting Center. Together with CBK, they're what we can call the Joint Operations Center, tasked with the responsibility of maintaining stability, confidence, and sanity in how you can carry out our transactions in the banking at the bank. The major object of the CBK under the Act is the principal object is to formulate and implement monetary policy directed to achieving and maintaining stability in the general practice, in the general level of prices. CBK is also required to foster liquidity, solvency, and proper functioning of a stable market-based financial system. If you look at Section 4A of the CBK Act, they have other objects which will not go into due to time. Sometime in 2019, CBK came up with what we call Banking Sector Charter. This was pursuant to Section 33 of the Banking Act of the CBK Act, in which they issued directions with respect to the standards to be adhered to by all the institutions under their control. The charter is premised on the banking sector's vision, hinged on 4 principal pillars. Number 1 is the adoption of customer-centric business models by the banks. Number 2 is risk-based credit pricing. Number 3 is enhanced transparency and information culture in banks, which requires staff to do the right thing. As we all know, all banking systems all over the world rely on ICT to carry out their functions. It's because of these banks are therefore interconnected through a system that allows them to share data and facilitate transactions amongst them. In Kenya, most banks use Oracle banking software that is provided by a company, by an IT company in charge of IT solutions. Moreover, CBK has also come up under Section 33 from the Banking Act. CBK is required to come up with prudential guidelines, and there are 23 of them. They came into force sometime in 2013. There are 23 prudential guidelines dealing with the different things, but for purposes of this discussion, I'll restrict myself to around 4. Number 1, there's a prudential guideline on anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism. The purpose of this guideline is to provide guidance regarding the prevention, detection, and control of possible money laundering activities and terrorism financing. The guideline also highlights prudent customer identification, record keeping, and identification of suspicious activities within the banking system, so that as a bank, you are able to detect that there is a particular account is being operated in a way that is not normal, and it's your responsibility to take it up with the regulator. Under that guideline, there are different things that it deals with. It focuses on process of crime. If you're talking about anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism, they target proceeds of crime. And the proceeds of crime is any property or economic advantage derived or realized directly or indirectly as a result of connection with an offense, irrespective of the identity of the offender. There's also the business relationship. The moment you open an account in a bank, you create a relationship between yourself and that particular bank. The documents you give them, your ID, passport, PIN number, you create a relationship between them so that your bank will know that you are our customer and this is what you will be dealing with. So, for example, if you are to open an account in a bank and you describe yourself as a farmer, then the next day, the bank sees that you are you've got many millions in your account, and if you are asked to say you are now dealing with the invasion of motor vehicle, that will raise suspicion with the bank, and they have a right to question you for that particular suspicion. When the bank knows you, then they need to apply that knowledge in all the dealings initiated by the customer. That's what I'm saying. So if you register as that, if you tell them you are a farmer, but the next minute you are doing business relating to motor vehicle, what exactly you are doing. In money laundering, there are 3 things that a money launderer cannot escape. At one point or the other, they'll have to be caught. These 3 things include the following. Number 1 is the entry of cash into a financial system. You've got 10 million in cash. You know very well that it's not safe for you to keep it in your house. So at some point you'll require to inject it into the financial system. That's the point the bank will determine that there's 10 million that has hit the system and you need to follow up where it's coming up from. Number 2 is cross-border flows of cash. You are out of the country. You need to fly in. You've made like $1 million out there. How do you come in with $1 million into the country? Somewhere at the airport, you'll be told to declare what you have. That's the point. They'll pick up the information and act accordingly. Number 3 is transfers within and from the financial system. You've got 10 million in your account. This money keeps on moving from account A to account B in a short time. Someone will ask you, what exactly are you doing? It came to account A, in a short time it has moved to account B, it has been split into account C and D, so someone will want to know what you are doing. So those are the 3 things that the bank normally looks into when they want to find out whether someone is involved in money laundering. The second guideline is guideline on stress testing. After a bank has put all its infrastructure in place, they need to know to what extent are they vulnerable. To what extent are they vulnerable so that if a bad guy out there wants to hit them, then that bad guy can easily succeed. This is why it calls for the bank or that particular institution to test how strong they are. This is why you call now ethical hackers come in. You work for a particular bank, but you want to test, can this system be hacked? So you get a staff from within to try hacking into their system to see how that can go. So banks are required to conduct stress testing so that they know to what extent they're exposed. Another guideline that I'll talk about is guideline on prompt corrective action. After you put everything in order, CBK wants to know the areas where you are not so secure, not so strong in. How will you conduct them? So once in a while, you'll see KCB here issuing particular directive to a particular bank. It's called prompt corrective action. Please do 1, 2, 3 so that you cover the weak links that you might be having in your system. So that's also a guideline that CBK exercises upon the banks in its supervisory role. Like I said, prompt corrective action order is by CBK to the banks it regulates. The order will require the banks to carry out certain remedial actions that the institutions should follow up on. This might include adoption of a capital restoration plan, just in case the depositors want to withdraw their deposit from the bank. CBK will want to know if your deposits fall below a certain level, what action will you take so that you get back to where you are supposed to be. So CBK will want to know that. CBK will also want you to strengthen the board of directors management. The qualification for someone to serve in a board of a bank. If CBK discovers that in your board there are people who don't qualify to serve as board members, they will let you know that so-and-so is in this bank. We approved his appointment as a board member, but so far something must have happened, so we do think he doesn't qualify to be a board member. CBK will let you know how to correct that. Another guideline, the last one I'll talk about, is guideline on consumer protection. All these guidelines are meant to protect the customer. Customer is the beneficiary of all these regulations. So if you put everything in place, CBK will want to know how you are promoting fair financial services practices within the particular institutions. And this basically is to increase transparency in order to inform and empower consumers of financial products and services in that particular institution. I'll go back again to money laundering. Apart from being a prudential guideline issued by CBK, money laundering is also an issue that has been tackled in different legislations. There is this particular legislation called Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act. In short, I'll call it POCAMLA. It calls for obligation of the bank to verify customer identity, require that financial institutions apply enhanced due diligence measures in business relationships and transactions, with any natural or legal persons, legal arrangements or financial institutions originating from countries identified as posing a higher risk. This is particularly deals with, there are those countries which have been classified as high risk countries, so that if you have a customer, as a bank, you have a customer transacting money from country X, and this is a country that has been kind of it's been flagged that be careful with anybody transferring money from this particular country. CBK will want to know what you do about that. And it's also a requirement under that particular act that you report any suspicion that might be coming from those particular countries. Like I've said,
Honorable Tiampo, you have about 5 minutes to go. Thank you.
5 minutes ago, thank you, yeah. So that is money laundering under the Process of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act. We come now to Financial Reporting Center. Like I've said, it's established under Section 21 of FOCAMLA, that's Process of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act. This particular institution is what I call the intelligence gathering unit within the financial sector. They will know, the moment you transfer 1 million to a particular account, they will want to know where that money came from. They will have that record even if they don't ask you about it, so that in case next time there's a particular issue, they'll bring it up. Now on cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, like I've said earlier, is also an issue that CBK is keen on. They want to know to what extent are your system safe. To this extent, CBK periodically issues guidelines on how banks should put their systems strong enough for people to be hacked into. They've issued a guidance note on cybersecurity, and it outlines the minimum requirement that institutions should build upon in the development and implementation of strategies, policies, and procedures related to activities to mitigate risk of cyber threats. The note also has various definitions that we need to know. The issue of cybercrime and cyber threat, PTO capability of someone to infiltrate in the system. We have got the cyber risk. Then we've got something called critical information infrastructure. This is the refers to interconnected information systems and networks, the disruption of which will have serious impact on the economic well-being of the customers of that particular bank. So those are things we need to know. Cyber assets, related devices, communication networks, including software and hardware that we need to keep in mind. Sources of cybercrime. They are different. I mentioned around 2 or 3. Cybercrime can happen in case there's a breach in the institution's database, in which data might be exposed to criminals on the internet, improper access to privileged accounts. There are some accounts that only a few people are allowed to access. So in case they fall in the wrong hands, that's what we call now a cybercrime has been committed. Something that I think my colleague will talk about is now the issue of, should finish in 3 minutes, is mobile banking. Right now, we can't survive. You can easily transact without going to the ATM. You can access your money from your phone, send, buy things, and all that. All that comes with the risks. There is a payment risk and data security. What will happen when one day the mobile network operator that you're using, say M-Pesa, were to collapse? God forbid. What will happen? So those are things people need to put in mind. System collapse. If it were to collapse, what happens? Where do we start from? We've been having M-Pesa for now more than 10 years, I think 15 years now. How will you survive without it? So the issues of consumer protection and awareness. Do we all know that our rights and what will happen when you are to lose your money on M-Pesa? Anti-money laundering, using mobile money transfer. That I've talked about. We need to Those are risks that we are susceptible to. We need to look into them. Then the technological development and legislation. Technology tends to come up faster than the law. You find tomorrow someone discovers something that the law does not regulate. You wonder how the law come in. Lastly, let me talk about the banking fraud investigation unit. Assume all these things happen in a particular institution. These are not normal things you report to a normal police station. There's a special unit within the DCI called the Banking Fraud Investigation Unit, and their role is to receive and investigate fraud complaints emanating from commercial banks and advise the financial industry on fraud prevention and detection. So that's the main unit that investigates fraud in the financial sector industry. Now, what is your role as a bank? What's the role of the bank and the customer in detecting fraud? As a bank, we are just supposed to follow the guidelines issued by the regulator, monitor cash flows and outflow, and monitor cash flow and inflows, inter-branch connectivity to be enabled with strong IT practices, then manage fraud and risk. How do you do this? You document referencing, you segregate duties among the staff, let them declare their wealth, monitor dormant accounts and control them, do integrity checks, do rotation, verify the signatures, train the staff, and encrypt the messages. As a customer, you are supposed to keep your credentials secret. Replace your passwords and ATM before they are closed. You don't wait for your ATM to expire for you to change your password. Let your account fall into dormancy. If you're not using it, close it down so that if you no longer want to operate it, and report any suspicious activity. It shall be done. Recommendations on how to do all this, how to make ourselves safe online. If you are to transact online, what do we need to do? Let's train our law enforcement officers so that they know exactly what needs to do. And in case someone is arrested, they are taken to court. Let's train all our judges and magistrates so that those who have contact of such matters and the technical know-how required to understand such kind of cases when brought to court. Banks are required to conduct frequent RAID team exercise. RAID team exercise refers now to stress testing. You know you are strong, but how strong are you? You've got your phone. If you are to drop it down, it might break. So what happens if you discover that it might break? Get a screen protector, get a cover. That is called RAID team exercise to identify the weak links before the fraudsters hit. Then the investigations unit within the DCI need to be marked. This is my opinion. There are quite a number. There's one dealing with specifically banks, one deals with the financial markets, capital markets, one deals with the insurance and all that. I think, my opinion, they need to be marked so that they work together as a unit. Then let's have watertight and consumer-focused legislation. Self-regulation is not enough. You won't allow someone to invent a product, roll it out to the public, then you expect it to be self-regulated. It's bad when we don't have a law regulating a particular product that has been embraced by a majority of the population. So we need to do all that. Continuous consumer education. At any time when a bank comes up with a new product, tell the public what this particular product entails so that they are aware, they know how to handle it. In case there's a challenge, they know how to address it. Mr. Chair, I think that will be it for now. I'll be taking questions later on after my colleague, Mr. Mbudia, has presented.
Thank you so much, Honorable David Odhiambo. Yes. You absolutely nailed it. I'm sure the members who are the participants will agree with me on that. Thank you so much for the research, the amount of research that you put into this, and for that clear and focused presentation. Thank you. Now, I've just noted from my device that the chat room is disabled. So what somewhere, so that when the time for Q&A starts, then we can answer those questions. Now, when that time comes, we can use the feature of raising hand. You can see on your gadget, there's a feature for raising your hand. So once you raise your hand, then you will be picked, and you start by naming the presenter that your question is going to, and then stating the question. So once we have 2 questions for a presenter, we'll have the presenter answer those 2 questions. And then the other one also to answer those 2 questions in that sequence, so that the session can be done effectively. So thank you for that session. Next up, we have Mr. Michael G. Mbuthia. Something about Michael, he also has a very long CV. So he is a payment specialist. He's coming to this meeting with close to 16 years executive level experience, because he has held senior positions in the public and private sector. He previously served as the Chief Information Officer and the CEO for Pesalink. You know Pesalink, huh? That is for the Kenya Bankers Association real-time payment platform. He also served as head of IT, risk and controls for Cooperative Bank. Also served as head of ICT for a multinational organization. And he has extensive operations experience from an international airline. Mr. Mbuthia is currently leading the deployment and implementation of the Rwanda National Digital Payments System, RNDPS. Michael holds an MBA in Strategic Management and Finance from the USIU and a Master of Science Information Technology from the University of Nairobi. He's a part-time lecturer at a local university. And as we are going to find out from the next presentation, he's also a prolific speaker on forums, especially the forums to do with technology. He's passionate about youth coaching and mentorship. That's quite a CV, Michael. So we are privileged to have you on this forum, Michael. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. First off, I'd like to thank the organizing committee for this particular opportunity, and also for Honorable David Odhiambo for going forward and kicking off this particular session. Also to recognize the president of Kenya Magistrates and Judges Association, and the fellow judges who are currently on the call, including Lady Justice Helen Omondi and other judges who are on the call. I'm honored to present to this particular esteemed group of professionals, including team members that I see that I've worked with on the call. I see around 31 participants. So I'll proceed. I will share my screen. I will put a caveat. I am currently in the office. I wanted to take this call before going home. What the chair didn't say is that I am a husband and I have a family somewhere, so at some point I will need to rush back home, lest I'm held in the office due to the curfew. So at some point you will kindly release me if I think the time goes on beyond what is necessary for me to get home. So I'll share my screen. I don't know whether you can see my screen yet.
Yes, Michael, we can see it.
Okay, so my presentation is around specifically ways of detecting online fraud. And mine will be overlaying what Honorable Odhiambo has mentioned, but specifically providing case studies as to what I've seen in the industry coming from where I've deployed payment solutions. But just as a general overview, the first slide, as you can see, is the online fraud syndicate that is currently there. So ordinarily what happens is, and from the experiences that we've seen in the industry, is that there's always a mastermind behind all frauds that you're seeing. And behind the masterminds are usually people who run the processes around how to acquire the money. So what we usually see on the next slide, as you see, is a wanted list of criminals or people who are suspected to be fraudsters, who are, chased by DCI, but most of these guys are the troopers. If you look at the previous slide, these troopers are usually mandated by a mastermind who, controls the whole entire fraud triangle. And as you're speaking about fraud, why is there an increase in online frauds? But as Justice Odhiambo has mentioned, the triad is actually three. Point number one is motivation. The motivation is usually internal or external pressure. I've had friends and colleagues who have perpetrated frauds in the banking industry because their mother was sick and they needed some money to pay for hospital. Other external pressure includes, lifestyle issues, because you're seeing your friend driving a nice flashy car. You do not realize maybe they come from a different family background than yours, and you want to, drive the same kind of car. So these kind of external pressures, especially force the young ones to start, perpetrating such kind of frauds. And then the point number two is opportunity, easy targets. And easy targets is that you're working in a financial institution, you're working in an organization, the processes in the organizations are not very, airtight, and you see the gaps. So you find that it's an easy target. You are not a fraudster by design. You have never stolen anything in your life, but just because you can see the opportunity, you think it's an easy target to make quick money. So that's usually point number two. And then point number three is usually rationalization. And what I've realized is a lot of people rationalize that I'll not get caught. I'll steal and I'll not get caught. No one ever steals thinking that they will get caught. So most of the people do 3 points in terms of when they're trying to rationalize on how to go about fraud. 1, motivation. 2, opportunity, because they're targets. And then 3, they rationalize, I will not get caught. And then 3 is that they rationalize that even if I get caught, the probability of me being taken to a court of law is very limited. And even if they do, there is no evidence. So that process is also, a motivation for criminals. Now let's look at the current trends. Let's start with cards. So if you look at cards in 2009, if you look at the statistics on in front of your screen, 61% used to be cards that were used for remote purchases. But if you look at 2009, 18% were counterfeit cards. That means between 2009 and maybe around 2012, when we did the EMV conversion, a lot of frauds were happening because people would easily duplicate cards and use them online. But let's look at 2020. The percentage on which counterfeit cards are actually being used has reduced by almost 2%. It has actually almost reduced to a position where it's almost negligible. But if you look at the remote purchase probabilities, currently increased at 76%. So just to explain the statistics, in 2009, we used to have these plastic cards that didn't have any security features on it. At the back of the card, there used to be a black strip, which was called a mark stripe, which had your card information, your name, your account number, and all the details that you have on that card was just encoded on that white mark stripe card. Now, when we moved towards EMV means electronic chip type cards, which you currently have. It means that the data is no longer only encoded on the black strip at the back of your card, but it is encoded on the chip card, but also when they're being encoded, when the data is being encoded on the chip card, it's also encrypted. So you find that the shift now has moved from counterfeiting the cards, duplicating the cards, to now using them for remote purchasing. So right now as we speak, no one can actually take your card and duplicate it. It's nearly virtually impossible because of the chip card. However, someone can actually take your card and use it, because if I have your card, I can easily see your card number, which is a number of digits in front of your card. And then on the back of your card, you have a 3-digit number, which you can use now to authorize payments online. So going back to the previous slide, you see the move between the counterfeit cards. Now we're moving largely into the card not present transaction. Card not present transaction means you actually don't swipe a card. When you go to QuickMart or you go to Naivas or Tuskys and you give your card to the counter, they either put it inside a POS and then you put your PIN in. So that is called a card present transaction, because the card is present at the point of transaction. Now, when you go online on Jumia, on Amazon, and you want to purchase a phone, you put in your card number and then you put in your CVV details, which is the number that is at the back of your card. Now, if you look at the statistics, the percentage of card not present frauds has increased, because you can no longer counterfeit cards, but you can do card not present transactions. Let's go slightly into mobile banking. And the biggest challenge that we're seeing on mobile banking has been SIM swaps. So for SIM swaps, it's fairly straightforward, because what happens is a bank customer or whichever customer that patronizes a bank, his credentials are stolen. Then a saboteur or one of those people that you're calling fraudsters go to an agent and get a way of duplicating your SIM card. And then the SIM card is used to link into your mobile banking account or your internet banking account. And from there, the fraudsters manage to exfiltrate cash from your mobile account or from your bank account. This has been one of the biggest challenges that we've seen in the industry as we speak. However, to give the current MNO, which is Safaricom, some credit, they saw this particular challenge, because the committee people would send all these SMSs and say, you want to do a transaction, please allow us to either, send you a text and then switch off your phone. After you switch off your phone, it means that at that particular point, they actually are the process of SIM swapping your line. When you switch on your phone, your line is no longer yours, it's already been taken by someone else. So what the current Safaricom has done is they have allowed someone to actually verify before someone registers your line. So that has really helped reduce the SIM swap issue. So let me just go into the cases, because I see I have at least another 5 minutes. Case number one is PesaLink. So there was a big title at some point in 2019 by the Standard. And the caption was how big banks lost billions in 1 week to cyber criminals. So as a caveat, point number one, I think my own personal opinion is that the newspapers tend to embellish or, how can I say, over-exaggerate a lot of matters. And in this particular matter, because as mentioned by Chair, I was I built the platform and eventually led the technology and integration with around 30 banks. So I'll just delve slightly into this particular case, just to show how online fraud is perpetrated, and then I'll give you some of the tips that we use towards addressing some of these things. Point number one, it was actually not billions that was lost. So that was a misconception. However, yes, there was a fraud. So what happened is, internally at a bank, someone managed to debit some internal accounts in one of the banks and use PesaLink to push money around into mobile wallets. So that was a case and challenge. It was a sizable amount of money. So the first thing we did was that we initially had a fraud management system that we could easily track the inflows and outflows of monies in and out of PesaLink. So we noticed that there was a spike in one of the financial institutions where funds were actually flowing out of the institution, not in the normal circumstances that they usually transact. So the first thing we did was alert the bank. Now, after alerting the bank, we alerted central bank as well. And then after alerting central bank, the next course of action was to freeze the accounts, because the monies are flowing into bank accounts and then from the bank accounts to mobile wallets. Now, freezing the accounts was an easy thing, because it was just contacting the bank and alerting them that please freeze these accounts that have received X amount of money. The challenge was when we started tracking the mobile banking funds, because what happens is when the funds hit a wallet, they're quickly withdrawn from an agent's network. So in terms of strategies on how we managed to address the issue is, one, we had a fraud management solution which we tracked and detected the anomaly. Point number two is we managed to block the accounts that had received funds. Point number three is that we worked with stakeholders, that is central bank, DCI, BFIU, towards pursuing the perpetrators, and I can say that we recovered close to 98% of the money that was targeted for fraud. Having said that, what next? So what are our arsenal of tools that we currently have? The biggest arsenal of tool at 64%, because I see a lot of people saying that they have installed a lot of technology-related products that can detect fraud. But the biggest opportunity that we see, and from statistics, is that frauds are usually more or less reported. It is a customer who comes and says, I suspect that I have lost money and I think it is fraudulent. So it is usually from the customer angle, so at 64%. Followed by largely by business rules. So you have the fraud management solutions that give you alerts that say, for instance, if right now you want to buy airtime as we speak, if you try to buy two consecutive 100 shilling airtime purchase, the first 100 shillings will go through, the second one will not. If you try to send value of a similar amount repeatedly, those transactions will be flagged. So those are the business rules that I'm talking about 4%.
Might you have about 3 minutes, please?
3 minutes, okay.
Yes.
So going just down quickly, there's data visualization, there's predictive analysis and modeling. Predictive analysis and modeling is predicting how a customer behaves and the trends. So if a customer transacts of 1 million shillings right now, what would happen is a bank will contact you and tell you that you are transacting a values amount that are above what you've been transacting. Please confirm your source of funds. So that's predictive analysis and modeling. And then there is geographical data mapping. Currently, if you've traveled out of country or out of town, and then you come to an agent and try to withdraw from an agent, sometimes you'll see a message that you're not near an agent, because the cell phone is still detecting that you're not anywhere near, the agent. So that geographical data mapping has been implemented by some of the mobile network operators. And then there's artificial intelligence, and then emotional tone and sentiment analysis, like, for example, what has been done by Safaricom, where you can reset your PIN by your voice. So just recapping everything that we've talked about, in terms of preventing online fraud, there is usually a strategy that has been employed which works well, and it is PPDR: predict, prevent, detect, and respond. I will need to say that people usually end up at the point of responding. A lot of people don't predict, prevent, detect, they only respond when the fraud happens. So under prediction, I think it is more like looking at behavioral analytics, providing fraud scoring models, like what I mentioned, what we had done in PesaLink, where you had a fraud management solution, which we had business rules around transactions and how we would view transactions in terms of velocity and all this. So that's predictive. Preventive is when it happens, what are you going to do about it? There's one thing about predicting, there's another thing about preventing. So preventing is locking accounts, blocking traffic, and anti-automation. Locking an account is making sure that there's no further exfiltration of money from those accounts. Blocking traffic is even blocking a whole IP address from accessing your internal network. Responding is now the elevated challenges and authentication, like 3D secure for Visa, identity proofing for some of the solutions. And then detecting is now high-risk actions. What do you do after you've responded? And the behavioral biometric analytics that you provide. And then the entity relationship and links. Like mentioned before, we work in a multi-stakeholder environment, and we have BFIU, we have various regulatory agencies that can help you address some of the online fraud issues that come your way. So in a nutshell, there's a just posture, and then there's a monitor posture, but there's also the response posture, and it all revolves around compliance and policy. So if we just remember anything from this presentation, I would like you to remember PPDR: predict, prevent, detect, and respond. Don't just focus on the response, also look at the predict, prevent, detect, and respond. Thank you very much. I will take questions from there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was some deep research. The presentation was also very informative. We really appreciate that. We appreciate the charts. We will all remember PPDR. Thank you. So now we come to the next session, which is the question and answer session. The floor is open. If you have any questions, please just raise your hand and then you'll be allowed to speak. It seems there is no question. Does that mean everyone has understood everything 100%? Yeah, now we have hands. Thank you. So we can start with Clive Mochiemo. Clive Mochiemo, please go ahead with your question. The name of the presenter and your question.
Thank you for the very lively presentation. Both presenters were very eloquent and very good and informative. My question goes to Michael. There is a big challenge in insider instigated frauds or insider facilitated frauds within the banking sector. How do you, using the PPDR, the predict, prevent, detect, and respond, how would you deal with it if the person is on the inside and they know the detection measures that are in place in terms of fighting fraud? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mochiemo. Next up, Mr. Charles Otieno.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Charles. You might need to add your volume.
Yeah, that's actually, David is my former schoolmate. My question is in regards to security. How should the browser you use in regards to the banking system? Because the systems we use are different. So how are they looking at security in terms of the browser? We have Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Firefox, and then one is stable, that is i.e. Internet Explorer. Then the others have these updates that keep coming. And you know that there's one that is the security is down, then there's the others that the security measures are up. Then secondly now, what are the ways in which, we have the system providers and the bank. Now, how are they working in unison to trace or to okay? Those are my questions.
Thank you so much, Charles. So, Honorable Diambo, you can go first. Let's give Michael some time to breathe. Please respond to your former schoolmate.
Oh yes, Charles, nice to have you here. How are you?
I'm good.
Yes, if I got your question right, the first question was asking about how the internet, the kind of internet they use is safe. Was that the question?
No, the question is in relation to the browser.
Yes, browsers, yes.
So we have Internet Explorer that is stable and many systems prefer using it. While we have Firefox, Opera Mini, and the others that many institutions, some institutions prefer using them because of the enhanced security measures in them.
I think I get you. Now, just to answer you, the banks do not use such kind of browsers to like carry out their activities. What they do, like I said, they have a software provided by Oracle Data System Management. This is a system that the bank will use it to interlink all their, to interlink, to store the data they have about customers and communicate with each other, so that you find bank X communicating with its branches everywhere. They don't use like Gmail, Internet Explorer, or Opera Mini and all that. Those are not the kind of Explorer they use. It's a special kind of software designed specifically for the banking system and the financial sector, let me say so. Insurance might be using the same thing, but not designed to suit their particular purposes. And trust me, it's secure. And once in a while, they do what I refer to stress testing. How can this system be hacked? So that's what they use. They don't use this normal Internet Explorer that use that, I don't know, Google, Opera Mini, Firefox, and all that. These are different kind of software they use. So it's not the normal kind of internet. The second question was relating to, I didn't get the second question correctly. Could you please maybe repeat?
Okay, so the second question was they are between the software provider and the bank, how they handle. And just to handle the first question, I understand that they use a special kind of software and they have different they have a system called Rubicon as an example. But these softwares, their accessibility, they have the URL and the ports and all that. So that's why I touched on the type of these. There are those that use browsers to access the software, or there is a special software that you don't need to access it via the different browsers. That's why I talked about it.
Okay, if I get you right, you're asking about the credibility of the software being used. Trust me, as an outsider, you might not be in a position to access the banking information about a particular bank if you are not a staff and if you are not connected to that, and if you are not a user with a designated username. The same thing, even if you are a staff, you can't access the banking information, the system, when you're home, unless this particular machine you are using, that particular laptop or computer, is allowed by the IT guys. So you won't sit somewhere and try to hack into Bank X system, thinking that you'll be able to view what is in everybody's account. It's not possible. You must have been authorized. They must have created a username for you, to enable you access their system. So it's not possible to access it from outside. About credibility, it's now for the banks to decide that this particular IT provider, solution provider, we trust their work, they've been used elsewhere, they've been maybe ISO certified, we can do business with them. So it's technical. If the IT provider they'll be using is one that is susceptible to being hacked, trust me, they won't use it. And they also know, if you know the service you're providing to a particular customer is a weak one, they will not work with you. So before they choose on what to work with, it has to be tested. It has to be tested for the bank to agree that this is okay, you can use it, you can deal with this. Because there's no need of picking up on a weak system, on a weak, on a poor service that will expose you to fraudsters. It's not possible for the banks to do that. So about credibility is for the banks to decide that this particular one is credible, it's been tried, tested elsewhere, the guys have maybe have installed it themselves, it's been given some grace period to work, see how it can work, and the bank, when the bank agrees with it, then they proceed and adopt it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Honorable Diambo.
Uh-huh.
Before we go to Michael, we have also a question from Honorable Justice Helen Omondi. Please ask your question so that then Michael will come and answer the other question.
Sorry, Daniel, actually, what Charles Otieno asked covered what I had in mind, so I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. So, Michael, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I think the question was around how do you address employee-related frauds. So the first thing is there is no silver bullet towards addressing some of these issues. A good employee today can actually be a fraudster tomorrow, depending on the circumstances that they face, especially now during COVID, when everyone is trying to struggle to get, earn some living and put food on the table. That one single employee can actually become a fraudster. But I think just as pointers, what I can say is that number one is just to know your employees, to know that, when a person is having difficulties or challenges at home or having difficulties or challenges financially, that can actually assist you in preventing that employee from possibly taking a course of action that is not very interesting. And then point number two is just implementing internal controls. Some of the controls that you implement are to dissuade some of the employees that we have from actually perpetrating some of these frauds. And then as what Honorable Odhiambo has mentioned, hire experts, because sometimes the expertise that are brought to the table come with certifications behind them. You have to be certified on ISO, you have to be certified on CISA, you have to be certified on some other level of bodies that can guarantee that you're a reputable person. And if that particular employee proceeds to perpetrate a fraud, they actually risk their own livelihoods because their certifications are put at risk and you can actually not get any more work. So hire experts, don't hire people who really are not experts. And then lastly, just be a brother's keeper. I mean, we see a lot of people one day, lifestyle has changed. You're driving one kind of car, the next day you're driving a big car. So just be a brother's keeper, try and reach out and see whether there's a challenge. And if there is, have a way of assisting. And then last but not least is to have some sort of internal reporting internally in an organization. Because as mentioned before, a lot of the frauds are usually reported frauds, either by customers or by internal staff. So have a sort of an internal or external reporting mechanism where if a customer suspects a fraud, they can actually come and report. Or if an internal employee suspects that there's another employee, perpetrating fraud, there is an avenue of doing that, obviously confidentially, and that can actually address some of these internal frauds that you're seeing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Please, a reminder again, after we have spoken, we should mute our mics so that we can enhance the quality of the voice, the volume.
Just to add on what Michael has said, in response to Clive's question, how to detect internal fraud committed internally. I'll give an example. Most banks have got internal controls that you as a cashier, as someone with access to the system, there are those transactions that you can't do without supervision. But if it happens that you are the person with the highest maybe rights guaranteed by that, allowed in that transaction, someone somewhere will detect it. I have a case somewhere, when I was doing research for this, there's a case law where a staff, just a cashier, took money from a suspense account in a bank. Let me explain what suspense account is. Suspense account is that account within a bank where money is kept temporarily, pending determination where it should be taken. Bank would have received some money from somewhere, but they don't know where to credit it. So the money will be kept in a suspense account. Just as the name suggests, suspense, you don't know where it will go. So these are customer who took money from the suspense account and credited this account. The policies of the bank are that as a staff, you can't receive more than 100,000 in your staff account. If you are to do that, you need authorization from the operations manager. This staff did that, credited his account with the money in excess of 400,000, and while the policy required that you can't deposit 100,000 in your account. Someone somewhere saw that just in time before you withdrew the money. So when they did the audit trail, it was confirmed that he had been doing this like on a weekly basis. He was so smart, he could do maybe 100 and, well, the limit is 100. You do 120 so that doesn't raise any suspicion so much. At times you do 90, 95, 80, but at some point they caught up with him. It was discovered that he was taking money from suspense account and crediting his own account. And it's a fellow staff who discovered that this was happening. So if you've got those hawk-eyed staff within the bank, they'll be able to monitor each other. They'll tell you there's this particular transaction going on here, something is not adding up, let's check it out. So that's one of the internal control mechanism that banks have. Just in case you want to transfer money without any authority, someone will smoke you out and they deal with you. That plus a number of others that I would suggest are indicated that staff need to be trained, need to do like lifestyle audit among the staff so that you don't allow them to live beyond their means, or you are able to detect if they're living beyond their means. Such things will help you detect when there is fraud committed internally. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Diambo. We have a question from Frederick Wahome. Frederick, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, team. Can you hear me?
Yes, Frederick, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I've really learned a lot. Mine is first to commend Honorable David Odhiambo. Thank you very much, sir, because you have really challenged some of us in technology, considering that you are in justice, and this is also a challenge to most of those in the judiciary, that you become an ambassador within the judiciary to be able to continue pushing for that knowledge to be there, because it becomes easier for us when we come to the court and we find the judiciary officers, the judges, already that they know much of this information and technologies. So the other one is to Michael. Michael, thank you very much for sharing the knowledge. So I have a concern currently, which is a challenge in our financial sector. Maybe in circles and also in our banks. Currently, we have the certified fraud examiner as a certification for most of fraud professionals within our financial institutions. But there seems to be a collision between the fraud examiners and the forensic examiners, because most of it, when they find themselves doing some of these fraud examinations, they hit a rock where they cannot be able to go ahead, maybe to continue to proceed with an issue to do with it. So how do we, how can this be sorted out? Because I believe this is a serious challenge, considering that these are the people who are supposed to do the monitoring, the predictions. At the same time, they find themselves, they do not have technical background from the IT. Do they go back to school and study IT, or do the IT people now study issues to do with fraud? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frederick. We have a number of questions on the charts, so I encourage everyone to also look at the charts. So let's respond to that, and then we can have Michael and Honorable Diambo also respond to the questions on the chat. And I have one question sent to me. Someone wants to know, how is the judiciary aligning with the new technology transformation to handle matters related to fraud? So that's one of the questions that I will request Honorable Diambo to answer. Let's respond to Frederick's question first. Thank you.
Is Michael still around? Will Michael take that, or he has left? He said he has a family he has to run back to.
Thank you, Honorable Diambo. I'll take that one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wahome, for the question. I think your question is very valid. First off, to comment on what you've just mentioned, it is very encouraging to see magistrates and judicial officers like Honorable Odhiambo, Lady Justice Helen, and the President on this particular webinar, especially this late at night, and very encouraging to see their contribution. So I think that I echo what you said, Frederick. To answer your question in terms of investigating officers in the banks and forensic, specialists, I think the ability for them to retool is mandatory now, because a lot of the frauds that are currently being perpetrated are digital. And I have personally witnessed challenges where the staff was supposed to investigate, an electronic fraud, lean more on the technology guys to provide them evidence, and then the technology guys are the ones who are actually perpetrating the fraud. So obviously you will not provide evidence to self-incriminate yourself. So I would largely advocate that the forensic and investigators, especially the ones who are working in financial institutions, to retool themselves. Otherwise they'll certainly be irrelevant, or two, they will provide reports that are fairly inaccurate, or have skewed conclusions based on the evidences that they've been provided. So that's my take on that.
Thank you, Michael. Before you go, there's another question to Michael in the chat room. We are increasingly having cases where customers dispute mobile lending transactions. How can we best manage issues of identity theft, especially for mobile lending? Please respond to that.
Okay, so thank you, Chair, for that. There are two concepts about payments. There is the concept number one, which says once a transaction is done and it is originated from your own personal device, it is final and irrevocable. So there is a concept called finality and irrevocability. There is a concept called finality and irrevocability. So if a transaction has emanated, for instance, from your card, a card can only be with you at a certain particular time, and it is evidence that it is you, only you has a card, then the financial institution will deem that as your responsibility. So what happens in these cases is, on the card side, you find that people tend to give their cards to their spouses, give their cards to their significant others and to their children. And what happens is the PIN gets shared, the card gets shared, and as such, the security that the bank has put around that card infrastructure is compromised. So when you go to a bank and say that your card has been compromised, and yet you had shared your credentials, you had shared your card, they will say that the transaction is final and irrevocable because you have inserted a PIN to finalize a transaction. Now, there's also a concept around, what do you call it, finality in terms of mobile banking transactions. Now, if a transaction has originated from your SIM card, you will have to evidence that, one, it was not your SIM card, and then 2, that you had custody of your SIM card and your phone, and you are not the one who did the transaction. So that is usually an argumentative approach that a lot of people use, but what the MNOs have done is that they have a way of geolocating transactions. So if you live in a certain area and yet a transaction was executed in a different locality from where you usually live, then they can actually say, yes, indeed, that was a fraudulent transaction. It wasn't you who did it. But if the transaction came from your cell phone, if it indeed came from the same regional or locality that you're in, then they usually say that the liability is yours. Then finally, there's something called a liability shift. A liability shift, both in mobile and banking, says that if you have compromised on the infrastructure that has been provided to secure the payment infrastructure, mobile or card, then the liability is not on the financial institution or the mobile banking operator. The liability shifts back to you. Now, if indeed you have taken all precautions in terms of making sure the card is secure, your mobile is secure, and yet you have been hit by a fraud, then the liability shifts to the financial institution or to the mobile network operator. The gray line there refers to the point about how do you prove whose liability it is. And once you prove that, then the case is usually fairly straightforward in terms of compensation. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Michael. We understand that you are short of time, so we'll ask you to answer the questions that are directed to you before we can continue with Honorable Odhiambo. There is a question here, reading, in order to predict the fraud, we need data, and the banks do not share any data in spite of anonymizers being available. Security experts can predict the attack patterns, but they need the data. How could the researchers get the data to help the banks to predict the frauds? That is from Clive Mochiemo.
So thank you very much. I understand where Clive is coming from. By design, banks do not share data with anyone, because what happens is you have to have even customer data, even your own account. No one can actually go to a bank and say, give me Daniel Sepu's statement for last month, because it is held in confidence, it is held in trust. Now, unless you have a court order, and that court order has to be backed by, a case or something that needs to be investigated, banks are not obligated to provide any data to anyone. Even the reporting that they do to central bank is usually a targeted reporting, values of accounts. There's usually a format and template that they provide. They don't just dump everything and provide to central bank. However, in terms of research, the best way to do is to approach a bank and get an approval from senior management to do, and especially if it's a research based on mobile banking frauds and trends, you can get a specific approval from senior management, where they can give you authority to get anonymized data, and it's on a case-by-case basis. So that is purely at the discretion of senior executive management in the bank. They are under no obligation to give you any data, especially customer data, because a customer can turn around and take them to court for providing confidential information that is ordinarily restricted. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. There's here another one for you from your presentation. It's from Edwin Regis, our host today. And the question is, between card fraud and account fraud, which one is on the rise in Kenya? How effective are banks in handling these challenges, especially online mobile banking transactions?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Regis, for that particular question. I think it's the same thing. A card is usually attached to an account number. Your debit card, at the back of it, is attached to an account number. So essentially, a debit card or a credit card transaction is usually attached to a bank account number. There are also virtual cards that really don't have an account number, but have a virtual, payment infrastructure behind it. So in terms of which one is rising fast, on the cards, the issue has largely been addressed by EMV by converting the, the card mark stripe to chip. So that particular fraud has really gone down significantly. What you're seeing is more of account takeover, account impersonation kind of scenarios. And with this, there's also a strategy around an eKYC database that will be able to validate an account holder across all member banks. So currently, if an account holder goes to open an account in Barclays Bank will do its own KYC based on the face-to-face interaction with that customer. That customer proceeds to take a credit line or decides to defraud the bank and move on to another bank, let's say, for example, Stanbic Bank. The customer will be able to open an account, proceed to do fraudulent transaction, and then move to the third bank. So there is no global eKYC type of validation. And that has been an issue in the industry. And I believe Kenya bankers, in terms of setting up some payment infrastructure for eKYC validation, apart from the IPRS that is currently there for ID validation, should be able to come up with some solution around validating account-based frauds. Because the card ones, they've largely addressed to a fair amount. As you saw, the statistics moved from around 19% of online card frauds to around 2%. So card frauds has largely reduced. So the account frauds are the ones that are currently going up, with the strategies that I mentioned, that there's an eKYC database that is possibly at play in the coming quarters. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And also thank you, Silvana Sewe. We can see the kind of information you're putting on the chat. We encourage anyone else with any information that you want to share, please put it on the chat. Let's take time to look on the chat as we continue. So if we have any question for Michael Mbudia, this is the time to ask so that you can give him time also to dash home. Any question for Mr. Michael Mbudia? Okay, in the meantime, Honorable Odhiambo, there was a question posted about the judiciary. Let me just find where it is. How is the judiciary aligning with the new technology transformation to handle matters related to fraud?
Well, Chair, that question was asked by, I think, by Frederick Pahome, right? Pahome is still there?
Yes,
okay,
sir,
this one was posted by someone else. Probably Frederick is the one who posted first.
I remember the one asked by Home on how the judiciary is embracing, I think, technology. Just to paraphrase your question, how the judiciary is embracing technology to combat fraud. Right now, the judiciary, as it is operating on a service delivery agenda called Sustaining Judiciary Transformation. It's anchored on 5 pillars, and the 5th pillar talks about automation, digitization, and improvement of work methods. This calls for use of technology. If you've discovered, in the last 3 or 4 months, courts all over the country have been conducting matters through technology. We've been on Zoom, we've been hearing witnesses on Microsoft Teams, and all that. That's one of the pillars that right now we are operating on. As of now, if you are to go to any court, if you are to pay any fine, or as you are to be paid any amount of money as terms of maybe cash bill refund or anything, nobody will accept cash from you. Get it from me. No court, wherever it is, nobody will accept cash from you. You've got pay bill numbers with which you can use to pay fines, pay cash bill, and all that. Nobody accepts cash. And when it comes to time for refunding that particular cash bill, when it's being refunded to you, the person who paid it, there's a process that you follow. You give us your details, the amount is processed, you get the money in your account. So we are doing all this to combat fraud. so that you don't find a case where that you refunded money to the wrong person. All these details takes process. Because if you are to use like hard copy documentation, it will take like a day or two so that you get your money. Someone can come to your office and say, hey, I paid this amount of money, case has been had and determined, and my cash been back for the accused. You might find yourself refunding money to the wrong person. So to avoid that, we are sending money. We need the adequate documentation from anybody who pays cash bail. The money will be refunded to you. You will find it in your account. Nobody will give you cash. Nobody will accept cash from you. We are doing all this to combat fraud. Because with the kind of things we're doing right now, if I'm to conduct proceedings on Microsoft Teams, the proceedings are recorded. The moment I'm done, I can log into my email, then I will find these are the proceedings in this matter. Okay? So it's working for us, and we appreciate. We are not yet where we want to be. Still much more needs to be done. We are experiencing problems of internet connectivity. Some of our courts are in remote places where we can't access the internet. We've got mobile courts sitting under a tree somewhere in a remote part of Kenya where people there also need justice. You don't have internet in such places. So we are not yet where we would wish to be, but we are trying our level best in embracing technology to combat fraud. Because with technology, you can have, let me call it digital trail. You can track that this money was sent to this particular number, so that in case there are issue, you can track it. But if you are to give someone cash in exchange for a receipt, next moment you are being told that the receipt you are given is fake, and is not the one issued by the judiciary, then you'll be asked, whom did you give the money? You go there and you find the face that received the money from you isn't there. That's a fraud that we'll not be able to detect. But if you are to pay money into our account, you come with the deposit slip, it reflects on our account, we are able to prove that there was a transaction between you and the judiciary, and you'll be assisted in doing all that. Despite all this, there are still people elsewhere, not within the judiciary, who might be in a position to clone their account. They might open an account in the name of maybe someone else, maybe of an institution, and claim that whatever money goes into that account goes to that institution. Yet that account has been opened by different people not related to the institution, and the money being received, accepted there, and is not being used for the intended purpose. Fraud is still there, and we are vigilant. Our IT department, the judiciary, has done a good job, not just in enabling us to conduct matters online, but they're also up to the task, and in case there's any fraud, they'll be able to detect. So far, I've not heard of any, let me say, fraud targeting the judiciary in terms of maybe someone stealing money online and all that. It was common when, at the time, some years ago, when we were receiving payments in terms of cash, but right now it's not possible. But we are still not leaving anything to chance. Mr. Ohoma, I don't know whether that makes sense. Mr. Ohoma, are you there?
Yeah, well, Honorable Diambo, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to us.
He's muted. Ohoma, I can't hear. You said there was another question from the chat?
Actually, no. We just have regards. We are seeing very wonderful comments, which means this session has been very lively. There are comments like the level of knowledge exhibited in this forum is awesome. So yes, speakers, Michael, Honorable Diambo, you've done great today. We really appreciate the sacrifices you've made, the presentations. We appreciate the research. And if Michael is still here, we want him to let his family know we are very proud of him, Honorable Diambo. Please let them know we are very proud of you. Sure. Thank you so much for this wonderful session. I am sure everyone has the same feelings here because I can see also the chats continuing to go. The word informative session has been repeated so many times.
Yes,
So now we want to hand over the session to Kelly Agira. Mr. Kelly Agira is the chairman of the Kenya Cyber Security and Forensics Association. Mr. Agira, the floor is yours so that you can close this session. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. They normally say whatever has a beginning must come to an end, and why not for time at be spoken till tomorrow. But thank you, the knowledgeable presenters for the day. That knowledge was really awesome, and you really done it well. I think you, all of you, deserve a clap. But social distancing and all that can afford a smile. In addition to that, this has been a thorn in the flesh, and I know it is, even as we speak right now, the aspect of issues about electronic frauds is way too high. And I love what Michael said, that right now, detecting who is a fraudster at times is even difficult because people have to make ends meet and all that. But they also normally say, you know, do it well. That is, you must be responsible at the end of the day. Well, on behalf of Kenya Cybersecurity and Forensic Association, we are very happy and we just smile our thanks for all the effort. And this is what basically we do as an association. We really have two arms, that is cybersecurity. What happens before these things get out of hand, the best practices and all that. And then we also have the other arm we call cyber forensics. Now that it's out of hand, how do you handle that? That's why the issues of electronic evidence management comes in. That's how now we get to deal with, and actually the association composed of three entities. That is the legal practitioners. That's why you see you have the lawyers here, the judges and all that. Then you have the ICT practitioners. That's why you can see the likes of Michael, speaking with all this knowledge. And you also have people from the law enforcement. And if you're keen for today, you would have wanted even to have the law enforcement guys. You from back in fraud unit to be in the team, but it wasn't possible. I know there's still much to discuss, maybe next time. But until then, guys, may you have a lovely night, and may God bless all of you. And apart from that, stay safe. Corona is still real. Thank you so much.
In the meantime, we see Carol Nyaga's
Over to you, Daniel.
Yes, we see Carol Nyaga's hand is up. Carol Nyaga, is it possible to put your question in the chat? And then we have Mr. Kelly Agira and his team. Make sure that the question gets an answer. You can also put there your contacts so that you can be reached with that answer. As I said before, this is a serialized webinars. These are serialized webinars. So we'll have another one coming up soon. Please keep coming. And even if you had questions and you didn't get an opportunity to get an answer, you can use even the next session to request for contacts of any presenters that we've had on this forum from the beginning, so that we make sure that all answers are shared. Thank you very much, all of you, for participating. You can now prepare to go and watch news. Associate, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much, and good night, everybody.
Thanks so much, guys, for organizing this. We appreciate everything.
And not a problem. Okay, all the best. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you and good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you and God bless you all. Good night.
Good night. Stay safe.
Good night, and thanks a lot. God bless.
Thanks, guys.